actually have a pretty interesting experience going from Harvard, or going undergrad at Harvard, and your grad school over at Penn, or Wharton more specifically. And so I was wondering, maybe you could explain, the differences between that and, how different students from those different types approach it, and kind of your advice to those different types of students nowadays.
When I was an undergrad, I came in thinking that I would be pre-med. I wanted to be an ophthalmologist. I grew up in Baltimore where I didn't have much exposure beyond medicine. My parents are both physicians and they had immigrated to the country. So, philosophically growing up, medicine felt like a very noble career that, was very secure and well established, and garnered a lot of respect. However, when it came to Harvard, all of a sudden it was like being in a candy shop where there are all these options that I had never even been exposed to before. So in my latter 2 years at Harvard, I ended up founding a startup, mostly just out of this curiosity of really understanding, how do you build product? How do you build a customer base? How do you garner empathy for customers? And so I spent about a year and a half working on that. In the back of my head, after that startup experience, I knew I wanted to get into venture because I kept thinking, how fun would it be to be on the other side of the table? And just being an intellectually curious person, it felt like the coolest job in the world, where every day you're learning something new, you're meeting with different people, and you're forcibly learning about different industries fairly quickly.
One thing I wanted to really touch on too was I saw you did a pre-MBA internship, which I thought was pretty fascinating because I'd never seen that before. So maybe even how you kind of decided to set that up for yourself too.
I wanted to do the pre-MBA internship because I hadn't had a rocket ship growth experience. I had had the really early stage startup experience with my own startup. I had had Microsoft, which is a behemoth. It has one of the largest market caps in the world, but I hadn't really had the Series A, Series C, crazy startup kind of growth period experience. So I ended up spending time at UiPath. I actually crashed a UiPath quarterly meeting that was happening across the street from my office. And I was so blown away by what they were building, by the leadership, the excitement, just the energy, that I went up to one of the VPs of AI who had presented and just said, "Hey, I'm about to quit Microsoft. I'm about to start business school. This is what I think I know how to do. Like, would you be willing to hire me?" And the guy said, "Yeah, like, let's, talk in my office next week. Like, we're always looking for help. Why don't you come over?" So did a series of short interviews, quit Microsoft, and literally started working there about 2 weeks later. But I was super targeted, and UiPath I knew was a high growth company. The other piece again was in the back of my mind. I always knew I wanted to do venture, and UiPath had been backed by some of the best VCs in the world. And in my head, I kept thinking, if I can better understand why VCs thought this was valuable by having experience there, then that would make me a better, again, would allow me to enter the mindset of a VC in a little bit more unique way.
Mm-hmm. I think you're probably one of the more unique cases that you've actually kind of in a sense planned a lot of that's not planned, but you really take the time to reflect of, okay, I had my startup, I went to big tech, and then now I wanted to do kind of the Series B to D company. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how did you build that skill? Because I think that is really valuable for students today, kind of approaching their young professional careers.
In my head, I always think through, where do I want to be in 5 years? And what are the steps that would get me to a place where I'm not just in that job in 5 years, in a personal situation in 5 years, but would allow me to be like best of the best or cream of the crop in those 5 years. And so that allows you to work backwards to really understand what an industry is looking for, what a particular firm might be looking for, or what a team that you might want to join might be looking for. And then from that 5 year goal, you then kind of work backwards to a 2 year goal, and you say, "Hey, what are the learning objectives that I can achieve over the course of 2 years? And do those align with where you see myself in 5 years?"
A lot of times you always hear the advice of like building networks or relationships, but it was I love the UiPath one where you literally just went to an event and just went right up to a person and asked them for a job. So I think it was almost like just a beeline through the network idea. But is that something that you were also conscious of as you were kind of growing? Because again, while Microsoft is, a very great place to work, it's somewhat outside of the traditional VC, powerhouse networks in a sense. But so again, how do you start to kind of build those networks, or did you wait until you kind of got to Wharton to start thinking through that again, or where did you see yourself building that portion of it?
The best thing to do if you want to be in venture is to act like a VC. And what that means is like look at your friends, look at your peer group, look at people who are building things, or look at people who potentially might be building things in the future, like just great people that you think would make for great founders, and introduce them early to VCs and say, hey, I talked to this person, this is what they're working on. I think it's really interesting for you and your portfolio for XYZ reasons. And if you can build that rapport by sending things over to the folks that you know, they'll start to trust you and they'll start to trust your opinion on deals. The other piece of advice I give a lot of students when they're about to interview with VC firms or even just talk to a VC is something that people don't do enough is before you talk to a VC or like a partner, maybe it's in your associate or VP who sits on the board, talk to the folks who work at their portfolio companies.